Every week, college football games hinge on a single word.
Touchdown. Touchdown, Texas. Touchdown, Oklahoma. Touchdown. Touchdown. Touchdown, Wisconsin. Touchdown. 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 Touchdown, Stanford. Touchdown. Touchdown, Alabama. Touchdown, Notre Dame. Touchdown. Wow.
This is Touchdown Radio. Here's Gino Torretta and Taylor Zarzour.
Great to be back with you on Touchdown Radio Tailgate for the third week of the college football season. He is the 1992 Heisman Trophy winner, Gino Torretta. I am Taylor Zarzour, and, you know, Gino, it's been kind of funky with the way the schedule has worked out so far. You've had a game or two to really look forward to in week one. LSU, FSU is kind of the premier matchup. Last week it was Bama, Texas. What's the matchup this week? Next week, the matchups are incredible, and then the rest of the year, conference matchups are. But this week's a little squirrely in week number 3.
Well, how many years have we done this to where we're like, God, these first 3 weeks, can they just get into the meat of the schedule? Because we had a bunch of, Power Fives against directional schools. Then we've had Alabama say, yeah, we'll play first, in the kickoff classic in Atlanta. And it's like just ramped up the season and kind of gone from there. We've had, you're right. We've had a taste of, the Florida State LSU. Okay, man, Florida State, are they the real deal? And, had some great matchups. Had obviously Texas, Alabama, which was built up as a great matchup, and it was. And kind of this is back to the preseason schedule. And, it's kind of an additional tune-up week, if you will. Is that a Miami Dolphins hat you are wearing?
You better believe it, baby.
Since it is early in the season, and I'm down here in Miami, so in typical overreaction to week 1 of the NFL, week 2 of Miami, the University of Miami is going to the playoffs, and the Dolphins are winning the AFC East. So I'm just letting you know the local reaction down here.
I don't want to overact, but I think Tua could have thrown for 600 yards if he would have found a few others in the game this past week. But yeah, I am hook, line, and sinker with the craziest, most prolific passing offense of my lifetime. We got to keep Tua healthy, and he looked very good in week 1, but that's for a different show. You referenced the Bama-Texas game. Speaking of jumping to conclusions, are you ready to jump to a conclusion that Texas is a college football playoff contender, that they're back, as people have been saying for years, or are you willing to say that the Bama dynasty is done?
I would not say either. Well, I would say yes to Texas. I really do. I mean, yours is very talented, but I think that the top of college football is very similar to the NFL now, to where if there's an injury to a critical position, a la the New York Jets of football in the NFL, you have a critical injury, critical position, then you might not be able to make the playoffs. But if without that injury, you stay healthy, yes, they are a playoff contender. Man, the kid is talented physically, athletically. He's got weapons. I think he has one of the, and I always thought Sarkisian, as a former quarterback, he's quarterback friendly with his calls. The designs of his plays are quarterback friendly, and he gets one-on-one matchups when the other defense doesn't want to give you a one-on-one matchup. He somehow finds a way to help his quarterbacks out. So I would say yes. Is the Alabama dynasty done? No, I don't think there's any question. They have a talented roster. I think what has happened is, just as, Miami years ago when they had the 01 team, 02 team with the most talented, probably the best team ever in college football, the turnover. I mean, Nick Saban, how long have we been saying, is this the year when you lose coaches, when you lose players, that you're going to have some kind of drop-off? Now, is the drop-off still in the top 10? I would say there's, without a question, the drop-offs. Maybe it's in the top 10. He, of all people, will get them on the right path. But I think it goes to, you lose Bryce Young. The guy was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft for a reason. And I thought he masked a lot of deficiencies on their offensive side last year.
There's no doubt that he did. And that's why I disagree with you. I think the dynasty is over. I think that they could win another national championship while Nick Saban is the head coach. That I'm not saying their chance of winning another national title is over, but the idea that they are going to compete to win a national championship every year. That's what I'm describing a dynasty as. And Gino, they weren't in the national championship picture the last few weeks of the season last year. And I don't think they will be again this year. Now, I still think they'll be a top 10, top 15 team. If the playoff format next year was in effect this year, I wouldn't be willing to take them out of the equation. But in a 4-team playoff, with the lack of ability to protect the quarterback and a lack of ability to get to the quarterback, at the line of scrimmage, Gino, the last couple of years, Alabama has been significantly worse than they have been throughout Saban's dynasty, which I think is the greatest dynasty in American sports history. I realize there have been other sports in women's soccer or women's basketball or track and field that have won more championships. But given the amount of competition there is in college football, I think what Nick Saban has done sits at the top of the board. But with the NIL transfer issue, and you saw it in Saban's post-game press conference after the Texas loss, he can't be the complete coach he wants to be in how to fix some of these problems. If he goes and tries to do that, more players will transfer. And that's one of the issues that we're now facing in college football. You can't do what Nick Saban has always done to fix the problems, which he knows what they are. If he tries to go and rip somebody apart, they're going to try to transfer to another school. I do think he'll correct the problems enough to keep them in the SEC West picture and have a chance to get to the SEC championship game. But the idea that they're going to run the table the rest of the year, not with those line issues, I don't think so.
Well, and I would equate it similar to, listen, you're the golf expert. At the end of Tiger Woods' dominant run, was it necessarily that Tiger wasn't playing to the same level, or that the other players thought they had a chance? Because you know as well as I do, when Tiger was in that run, in the 54 holes, they were like, okay, Tiger's winning this tournament again, and he's winning another major. And right. I think mentally that maybe those guys they pressured themselves or didn't play as well. I think now maybe the opponents of Alabama are like, hey, there's chinks in the armor. There's not that attitude like Alabama's going to, stomp us in the fourth quarter. They're going to come out. They're going to find a way to win. And I think a lot of college football, listen, 90% of it is believing. I mean, look at what Prime has done in Colorado. If you believe and you're prepared, you're going to have an opportunity. And I think that's where the opponents of Alabama now, they feel that they are going to be there. If they're there, they can win the game, where I think in prior years with Nick Saban's team, they thought they were good enough, but they didn't really think they could win the game.
It's like you can read my mind. It's like we've been doing this for a while, because the other thing I wrote down to talk about in this segment is Prime. Did you expect this? I mean, I know it's only 2 games, but he's 2-0. He blows Nebraska out of the water, goes down to TCU, gets the victory. He is the talk of college football through the first 2 weeks. Game day's going there this week. They've got Colorado State, who's an inferior opponent. They really should be 3-0 by the time they get ready to play their last ever Pac-12 schedule in the greatest conference of 2023 in their last year of existence, the Pac-12. Did you expect this? Did you have any idea that Deion Sanders would do this?
I would say this. I watched the spring game on ESPN and watched, and I was like, wow, there wasn't a lot of talent. I mean, I think I was bigger than a lot of the offensive linemen and guys in the trenches. And I'm like, you can't win with that. So you don't know. I mean, with 86 new players, there was a lot of new players coming in even after the spring game and in the summer. And I think it's awesome. I think, with TCU, listen, they lost a lot of players from a team a year ago that made the playoffs, and Dugans and a lot of great players. I think with Nebraska, kind of the same thing, what you can be successful with the portal, or maybe not so successful. You go to the portal, you get a quarterback. Maybe he lives up to the hype. Maybe he doesn't. Hey, it's still recruiting. You're still hoping you think that player is going to be the player. And Deion's been outstanding. I mean, his kid's been phenomenal. Hunter has been, I mean, if there's not a better story in college football, a two-way player playing 100 snaps a game. And is he just in better shape when you're practicing at altitudes. Listen, the Olympic sports, they practice at altitudes. They train the bike racers. They train at altitudes for a reason. I think this kid might be the best conditioned athlete we've ever seen in college football because of where he's training. But it's just, I mean, attitude can take you and listen, those kids believe, and that's a lot of it in college football.
I mean, where do you think this ends up at the end of the year? I mean, can they beat USC? Can they beat Oregon? Can they beat Utah? Can they hang with the top Pac-12 teams? And again, I know it's kind of funny and we're kind of poking fun here, but the Pac-12 is the best conference in college football so far this year.
I would say top to bottom. I've never get what's the best conference. To me, it's like, okay, what's the best?
Well, we're going to get into that.
Just because Georgia's in the SEC doesn't mean they have the best conference. They have the best conference because top to bottom.
Well, we're getting into that in the next segment. I want to know, what do you think Colorado's ceiling is?
I think they can compete with those teams, the top of the Pac-12. I'm not sure they can get over the hump with the personnel, because I still would say there's a personnel difference between USC, Utah, and Oregon and Colorado. Now,
so 7-8 wins.
I think that's a possibility, because if they continue to get better, if they kind of don't have the injury bug, I think they're a 7-win. They could get 7+ wins.
I almost hesitate to ask you this question, but then I think to myself, this is a realistic question. If they win 7 or 8 games, if Deion keeps this up, you know good and well what's going to happen at the end of this year. And I know it's only 1 year, but some program, and when I say program, I mean one of the biggest programs in all of college football. And I don't need to name specifically who they are, but one of those programs is going to offer a mind-blowing Shohei Ohtani type deal to Deion Sanders at the end of the year. You know that's coming, right?
He's not. No chance he's leaving
after 1 year. You don't think so?
No, unless Shedeur is done and goes to the NFL in 1 year, which I don't think he's eligible this year for the draft. He's not. He would not be done until his son, the quarterback's done. That's what I would say. I don't think there's any chance. I think he's got a opportunity that he's been able to coach his kids through high school. He's essentially gone to college with them, coached them at Jackson State first, and now they're at Colorado, because as the NC2A and their infinite wisdom with transfers, and just ask North Carolina with their receiver, if he left and transferred again, the NC2A would say, well, that's the second transfer. Sorry, we're not going to,
Are you sure? Because for some players, they allow them to do it, and then for some, they don't.
I'm not sure of anything, Taylor, but that's why I said you're taking a risk. I'm just telling you, I don't think it's going to happen. That would be me. If it does, and I'm wrong, man, I mean, props to Prop.
I'm not asking him to leave. I'm just saying the guy is going to get so much attention if this. He's already getting. Incredible.
I mean, heck, you watch a game on TV. I mean, it's like, Big Noon has now changed they were supposed to go to Penn State, Illinois. They changed their staying in Colorado 2 weeks in a row. If you watch a Colorado game on TV, Deion and Saban are in every commercial. I mean, it's like, it is truly a 5-hour commercial for Prime and Colorado. And it's just, I don't doubt whether the guy's going to be successful wherever he goes or stays. Kids believe, and that's a big deal in college football. And it's fun. I mean, he's having fun. It seems like he's having fun.
It really is. It's remarkable what he's doing, and it deserves to get a lot of attention. Okay, even though you don't like to tell me who the best conference is and who the worst conference is and all that, I got to get into this conference discussion.
Okay.
Because I've got such mixed emotions. As somebody that always has loved the Pac-12, I know I'm an SEC guy and I'm from the SEC, but I love going out and doing those Pac-12 games with you through the years. I have such mixed emotions about this conference ending, and here we are, and they're incredible finally. And we've been waiting forever for them to be incredible. I got to get into this, and we'll talk about some other conferences, and the SEC doesn't look so great in 2023. We're going to get into that coming up next here on Touchdown Radio Tailgate on SiriusXM Channel 84. It's Touchdown Radio Tailgate here for week 3 of the college football season. He's Gino Torretta, And I'm Taylor Zarzour. The Miami Hurricanes playing at the bottom of the hour against Bethune-Cookman, number 22, of Miami of Florida Hurricanes that Mr. Torretta watched whip up on the Texas A&M Aggies. And let's start there, Gino. The SEC, it's been a miserable start to the season in these non-conference matchups. Miami whips Texas A&M. FSU beats up on LSU. Utah beats Florida. North Carolina beats South Carolina. The only real win the SEC, I guess, can pump their chest about is Mississippi State in overtime.
Well, that's their only win. They're 1-4 against the ACC, so it's their only win.
Now this week, leave it to Missouri to make sure everything's going to be fine. Mizzou hosts number 15 K-State this week in another one of those matchups. And again, the SEC is the underdog in that game. I am privileged to call it on SEC Network on Saturday. You're watching one as well. But, I mean, with all due respect to the rambling wreck of Georgia Tech, a little outmatched against Ole Miss, you would think, on Saturday night. The Rebels did survive against the backup quarterback of the Tulane Green Wave this past week. In total, what do you think about where the SEC is right now? Of course, we have to include Texas' win over Alabama.
Well, but isn't Texas in the SEC?
Yeah, sort of.
I think that, you got to kind of chuckle because what do we always at the end of the year when the bowl games don't go in the favor of the SEC teams? Oh, it didn't matter. Our team didn't care. We only care about the national championship and the 4 playoff teams. I think that it's been a great start, for the ACC as being 4-1 against the SEC. I think there was some great matchups that favored the ACC teams. Am I ready to just say based on that start, the ACC as a conference is better than the SEC? Listen, I think roster-wise, the SEC is better. The top of that roster is better on most of those schools. But it has been a great start. I think that, the Miami game against A&M, I was a little shocked. I mean, I got to be honest. I think Miami's obviously in the building process. They've had huge success with big players in the trenches, offensive and defensive line. And I thought, well, I think A&M's probably, obviously, with more time recruiting those top flight players, had players. But man, Miami just they went out there and dominated the line of scrimmage. They protected Tyler Van Dyke. They got to Wigman on Texas A&M's part. Heard Jimbo didn't like the players clapping or something. That was, I mean. No offense, it wasn't the Orange Bowl. It was loud, but as well as I do, when the Orange Bowl was crowded and packed, like that was a home field advantage, and I just I kind of get a kick out of that.
You should.
I will say this, Taylor, going out there, you told me I had to walk around on the field, so I was down there, and then obviously there's lightning delay and kind of moved the game back 20 yards. But I walked across the field, and the first thing I thought, I was like, this is a young turf. I go, there's not the density of grass. There wasn't a lot of blades of grass, and I saw a lot of sand. And I'm like, this field isn't in great condition. It's the start of the year. And, I thought first off, I mean, like, you better go long spikes, old screw-in spikes on it. And apparently Texas A&M didn't, because they slipped a few times, and Miami did as well. But, that field wasn't exactly – creme de la creme for an early season game in Joe Robbie Stadium, Pro Player, Land Shark Stadium, or Hard Rock Stadium, whatever it's called now.
SEC does have 5 teams ranked in the top 25. Aggies did fall out. The ACC has 4 teams ranked in the AP top 25. Miami moving in. We'll see if Tennessee still is a national championship contender this year. Haven't looked great in the first couple of weeks, especially this last week, but once they play stiffer competition, we'll see what the Vols are made of. They're at the Gators on Saturday night. We'll pick that game a little bit later. The Big Ten has 4 teams ranked in the top 25. Michigan is number 2. Ohio State is number 6. Then you have Penn State a little deeper down in the rankings at number 7. Wisconsin lost this past week to Wazoo, so they fall out of the rankings. Iowa does jump in. The Big 12 has 3 teams. Texas, as you've already talked about, is number 4 in the Associated Press rankings. I don't know how they're not higher than that, honestly. K-State we talked about. Oklahoma's in the top 25 as well. So you have those teams that are ranked so far in the Big 12. And then there's the Pac-12 with a record, all-time record, 8 schools ranked in the top 25 right now. 11 of the 12 current members are undefeated. The only loss of the season is Arizona in overtime last Saturday night in Stark Vegas. Gino, I mean,
well, Cal also lost to.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Yeah, that's right. They lost to Auburn. That was a convincing loss. So you have 10 of the 12 that are undefeated. Excuse me. And then yes, Cal lost to Auburn, and you've got Arizona losing to Mississippi State. But still, 8 teams in the top 25. Why did they wait until the conference was falling apart to be great in football?
Well, listen, you're a fan. I'm a fan. The Pac-12 has always had Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12 has always had great quarterbacks. And I think it's a year of there's questions of who's going to be the best team this year. You know, is Georgia going to be able to repeat for a third time without Stetson Bennett quarterback? Who's going to be Alabama's quarterback? So there's questions really on some of the Blue Bloods who the starting quarterback was. They have not had that in the Pac-12 this year. You got Caleb Williams, won the Heisman Trophy, he's returning at SC. You got Nix, who I'm all in. He's been playing better and better. At Oregon, Cam Rising, even with his injury, the backup quarterback back at Utah has been money. And then, hey, here's Colorado. Here's Colorado, and Shedeur Sanders and Prime are lighting it up for Colorado. So I think that the conference this year seems to be back of the historic nature of, you know, when you get a guy like Elway and you know, Marinovich, all these guys, great quarterbacks, Liner, that have come through the Pac-12. I think it's the conference with the best quarterbacks, most experienced quarterbacks, and that's why there's 8 of those teams in the top 25 right now.
You didn't even mention Penix at Washington or our guy DJ Uiagalelei in Corvallis with the Beavs at Oregon State, who are ranked 16th in the land. So yeah, I mean, you got options everywhere, but it really is, it's just such a bummer that this conference is falling apart. I don't think any fan across the country wants this. I understand why the teams are leaving and how the Pac-12 did a terrible job of securing its broadcast rights for the future. And I understand the way business works, but it still doesn't mean I think this is what the fans want. My hope is that this continues through the year and we have multiple Pac-12 teams that have a chance to get to the playoff, and maybe a Pac-12 team wins the national championship. I hope that the fans get to celebrate this final year of the Pac-12.
Yeah, and like we said last week on the show, is you hope there's some kind of commissioner, somebody steps in and say, listen, we have to have a West Coast conference, if you will, and some people that are playing amongst each other out there within the Power Five, whatever that 65 team playoff or whatever that ramifications of all the machinations of the conference realignment. I mean, think about a few years ago, Texas and Oklahoma were on their way to the Pac-12. I mean, had that happened, it would have been a seismic shift where it would been the two coasts would have been the powers of the college football world. They didn't pull the trigger or didn't get the deal done. And now the conference is down to essentially 2. And I love this one with the news this week. The 10 that are leaving, they want the conference to pay for their moving expenses. And Oregon State and Wazoo are like, well, how do you get to vote? You're not even in the conference. You told Colorado they're out. They can't vote on a Pac-12 matter. So that's in court, and they've stayed everything and frozen everything. So it's I agree with Oregon State and Wazoo. If they're the only 2 left, they should be the ones in charge of the money that's left in the conference. But yeah, it's I think it's one of several things that disappointing things that have come out with realignment and the playoff and hopefully smarter, more common sense people prevail to say, hey, we need teams on the West Coast and a conference or division out there to where we're going out there. We're all playing amongst
I would hope
each other.
That would happen.
Yeah,
I would hope that maybe this is just temporary, and after a few years we have a football only part to college football, and that it does get back to divisions at some point.
I got to say this is, so had a home game, had a Miami game, but I flew out to see my mom and on Sunday, flew into San Francisco, and I land, and I'm tired, didn't have a lot of sleep on the plane. And I land in San Francisco, and I'm like, there's a guy in all Auburn gear. There's another one. There's another. And I was just like, what? And like my mind didn't register. And I'm like, why are there all these Auburn fans in San Francisco? And I'm like, oh my God, because they traveled to go see their team play Cal. And that's what you're going to miss. And I know they haven't gone West Coast, obviously, very often, but those are the kinds of things that the West Coast people are going to miss. You know, you're going to get SEC or Big Ten teams coming to town, and the fans coming to town. You get the fan base gets to see, you know, San Francisco, Berkeley, Los Angeles, whoever is in that. Those are the kinds of things that I'm disappointed that the fan bases aren't going to be able to travel and see places in states like that.
Well, next year, the NC State Wolfpack can go out there and play a conference game against the Cal Bears, which is just remarkable to me that's where we headed in 2024. And I know I got ahead of my skis with all the Pac-12's undefeated teams. We do have 9. Let's see. So we have 8 undefeated Pac-12 teams that are all in the top 25 so far this year. But with the teams that are not in the top 25 are not undefeated, because Arizona State lost, as you mentioned, Cal lost, Arizona lost, and of course Stanford lost in a conference game, getting blown out to USC. So it is, but it's been an incredible start to the season, and to have those 8 teams undefeated in the start that they have, we'll see if it continues for the Pac-12. We have to talk about the early games on Saturday, because while there isn't a top 25 versus top 25 matchup this week, there's some sneaky games at noon to pay attention to where you might see an upset. And I want to see what Gino's thinking about some of these games before we ask him to pick them coming up a little bit later on in the broadcast. This is Touchdown Radio Tailgate on SiriusXM Channel 84. Touchdown Radio Tailgate, getting you ready for this weekend's action. Of course, number 22, Miami, plays Bethune-Cookman right now as the show is being broadcast. Memphis is playing Navy as well here on a Thursday night. Then tomorrow, Maryland is playing Virginia in a game that I really want to say is a conference matchup. But, of course, for years it has not been one. But those are the games that will happen before we get to Saturday. Air Force also plays Utah State. So those are your Thursday and Friday matchups. Then when we get to Saturday, Gino, what about these noon kicks that are intriguing to me? We're going to pick all of these games coming up in just a little bit, but I just want to know this from you. Number 3, FSU is at Boston College. BC looks like the bottom feeder of the ACC so far. Number 15, K-State is at Mizzou. I've got that one. The 99th meeting between these two schools, but the first time they've played each other in Como at Mizzou in 13 years. Sold out, by the way. Excited to get to Faurot Field for that. Number 7, Penn State is at Brett Bielema in Illinois. And number 14, LSU is at Mississippi State in Stark Vegas with all those cowbells clanging. Which one of those do you think the underdog has the best chance of winning?
Well, I would say, I want to say Missouri, but, you know, I have just something about the Mississippi State game. I don't think LSU they haven't played great, and go on the road. Stark Vegas, tough place to play. It's going to be 11 a.m. actual kick locally. Yeah. So noon Eastern kick. But then I look at Penn State, Illinois. The last time I did Penn State, Illinois, it was in Happy Valley, and it went 9 overtimes. And Penn State didn't adjust to Illinois trotting out 7 offensive linemen the entire game and just run the ball down their throat. But, I think those are all great matchups. And I think it's going to be interesting. It's almost like last week with the Miami, Texas A&M. Whoever wins is kind of vaults them. Hey, there's going to build some confidence, and team feels good about the rest of their season. So I would probably say Mississippi State of those, just because of that environment. To me, is the hardest place to play for an opponent of those schools, having done games everywhere.
Penn State's a 14.5-point favorite at Illinois. That game's intriguing to me. It seems like that's always been a close call, and Illinois has been playing the top teams in the Big Ten very well since Bielema got there. So that's one that I have an eye on. I do think that FSU should have the most convincing victory of those four that we just looked at. I mentioned Maryland versus Virginia, which of course is now a Big Ten versus ACC matchup, even though it feels like those two teams should be playing in the same conference still. That is one of 6 Big Ten versus ACC matchups this week. Do you like that, Gino? Should we see more of this? I realize we're about to have again realignment, so we're not even going to realize what conference any team is in next year. But you've got Indiana playing Louisville, Rutgers is playing Virginia Tech, Purdue is playing Syracuse. Of course, there's a lot to discuss with Michigan State. They're playing actually a Pac-12 team this week. Washington is playing at Michigan State, but that's another game where you're going cross different conferences. Staying with the ACC and the Big Ten, North Carolina also is playing Minnesota this week, so that should be a fun one to look at. Do you like to see Duke Northwestern's the last one I was trying to find? Do you like this ACC Big Ten situation where you have 6 different games against each other's league?
I don't think there's any question. I like it because they're matchups that you and I have grown up seeing. And I think it's maybe you don't see it all the time, but Virginia, Maryland, I mean, obviously I probably think like you, basketball matchups and the Cavs, but I think that those games are what the fans and what college football generally wants. And I would say that's where I would hope we go with this whole conference realignment, and whether it's Big Ten, SEC, I don't know how that all works, but I think the fans are like, okay, if we're really not going to have conferences, because that's kind of what it is, you can't have 2 conferences and they're the teams playing for the national championship. It's got to come down to geographic. And then, hey, the NFC Central is playing the NFC West this year. And then there's a commissioner that figures out a schedule.
Yeah.
And then there's a matchup of, hey, if Cal and USC aren't in the same conference, they still should be playing each other once every few years, because that's where they should. You're supposed to stay local and play. And then you throw in the Texas and the Alabama. Man, this is a matchup we haven't seen, and you would get the home and homes, sprinkled into the schedule. And I would hope that what these schedules turn into in college football, and I know it's not, because it would be just too much common sense to say, hey, let's keep this regional. Let's make sure Texas, Oklahoma play. Let's make sure A&M and Texas play every few years. Let's make sure Miami and Florida play every few years. And we keep those traditional college, because I don't think any fan base gives 2 hill of beans what conference they're in. I think they care. They got a chance to play for the national championship at the end in the playoff system, and they're playing in some place like, oh, wow, this is a great rivalry game. Or I remember my dad talking about Oklahoma and Nebraska in the 70s with Johnny Rodgers, and I want to go to that game and support my team. And that's what I think that I would hope that this would turn into. And I don't have a lot of confidence it's going to, but maybe if we just keep talking about it will turn into that.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. I really feel like we're going to need a commissioner that's overseeing all of this in order for that to happen. But I'm optimistic that's where we're headed. It may take 5 years to get there, maybe 10 years to get there, but I am optimistic eventually that is where we're headed. I also wanted to ask you this, and I realize this is going to be maybe the toughest question I've asked you in the first 3 weeks of the season, because trying to remember who's in the group of 5 is going to be an exercise for all of us. But I'm also interested to see who's going to get to the New Year's Six. As an example, Gino, through 2 weeks of the season, Memphis is the only undefeated team in the American Conference at 2-0. Conference USA, Liberty and Western Kentucky are the only undefeated teams at 2-0. By the way, News Bulletin, Liberty's now in the Conference USA, in case anybody didn't know that. You do have 3 teams that are still undefeated in the Mountain West: Air Force, Fresno State, and Wyoming. The MAC conference is typically one of the worst group of 5 leagues. It has no undefeated teams that are left. And then the last one to mention is quite possibly the best one. At least the last few years, it's been one of the best. And that's the Sun Belt. Georgia Southern, Georgia State, James Madison, Marshall, and Louisiana Monroe are all undefeated. Do you have any idea who's going to the New Year's Six from the group of 5 this year?
I don't think so. I think, you would think Tulane after the big win last year against USC, but they just lost last week. You got Texas, you got teams that are like, okay, they're talented. So how are they going to react in their conferences? You mentioned one, the last one you mentioned. If Georgia Southern's able to go this week into Madison, Wisconsin, and pull out a victory, they're not a huge underdog. They're an underdog, but not probably where you would think. If they're able to pull out this, and you got a coach in Clay Helton, outstanding staff that they're putting money into the program, I'm just telling you, they might be the ones at the end to say, hey, you know what, we're here to the party like Tulane was last year.
Good call. That's one to watch this weekend. Right now, Memphis is playing Navy. Memphis is that undefeated team in the American Conference. We'll see if the Tigers, who were shunned by the Big 12, while Cincinnati and UCF and some of the other teams left them, we'll see what they can do. And James Madison held on for dear life against UVA last weekend. Of course, they were one of the best FCS programs for so many years, and now they're playing with the big boys, at least in the group of 5. They're at Troy. That's going to be a tough game for them on Saturday. So want to make sure we continue to show love to those group of 5 teams, because I know in recent years they don't get enough attention. But we're not picking their games. We're going to pick the Power 5 games coming up next, and we'll go through the 10-game slate. Gino's got a 1-game lead on me after
got one. You got one on me.
Gus Bus and UCF won at the gun against Boise last week. So I picked up one on you. We'll make those picks coming up next on Touchdown Radio Tailgate. It's Touchdown Radio Tailgate for week 3 of the college football season. He's Gino Torretta. I'm Taylor Zarzour. Gino is 14-6 so far this year picking games. I'm 13-7, and we're about to make picks here for week number 3 of the season. I don't tell Gino what the games are going into this, which is the way he likes it. Let's start with the number 3 Florida State Seminoles at noon on ABC, playing at Boston College, a huge 25-point favorite. Boy, BC does not. I could take it.
I could take it without points. I'll take it.
Straight up. Florida State's going to whip Boston College. If you haven't noticed already, it's going to be tough to get to 10 games this week that are competitive.
Yes, I wrote down 4, and I'm like, I wonder where Taylor's going to go with the other 6.
Number 7, Penn State at noon on Fox is playing at the Fighting Illini of Illinois. The Nittany Lions are 14-point favorites in the game. I think this is going to be close. I like Illinois plus 14, but we're picking it straight up, so I have to take Penn State to win the game.
I'm there with you. I was going to say I'll take Illinois with the points as well, but Penn State I think has been outstanding. Their new quarterback has been efficient. They have some weapons. And I think they'll play a very good game.
This next one is LSU, ranked 14th in the country, at Mississippi State at noon on ESPN. LSU's a 9.5-point favorite. Based on what you said in the last segment, am I hearing a lean towards the Bulldogs?
You know what? Just to spice it up, I'm going cowbell. I know you're the SEC guy, and you're going LSU, and maybe that's overreacting to the Florida State game, but I'm going to take Mississippi State at home. What the heck?
Very good. Okay, next up is the game. I'm
taking
calling
LSU, I assume.
Yes. Well, you already said it, so I wasn't going to argue with you. Yes. I am. I'm taking the Tigers to get back in the winning column. They haven't looked great these first 2 weeks, but we'll see if it happens in Starkville. If not, Brian Kelly's going to have some questions to answer at 1 and 2 after all the hope going into this year. K-State is ranked 15th in the country, and they're in Columbia, Missouri for the first time in 13 years. It's the 99th meeting with the Mizzou Tigers, who are also undefeated. Noon kick on SEC Network. Alyssa Lang, Matt Stinchcomb, and me calling the broadcast. So I'll sit this one out. I'll just let you pick the game.
I'm taking the visiting team. I'm going to take the K-State Wildcats, and I think they're going to go on the road. They've been playing outstanding the last couple of years. They keep getting better, and I think that's going to be a big matchup and a big win for them if they're able to pull it out on the road.
Now, K-State has this line is only a 5.5 point line, by the way. K-State is favored by 5.5, so it really is one of the closest.
So are you staying in St. Louis or are you staying in Como?
Depends on what night you're talking about. But the night before the game, I will be in Como on Friday night. Yes. Tonight, maybe staying elsewhere, but tomorrow night I will be in Como, and then I will be trying to find my way back to Charlotte after the game on Saturday, but need to get creative in order for that to happen. Let's see if Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide can block for Jalen Milroe this week, and they turn into more of a running team. Alabama now is ranked 10th in the polls. They're on ABC at South Florida. They're a 32.5 point favorite in this game.
Goodness.
Gino, I still have a lot of concerns about the line of scrimmage. I think the defensive line is what I'm most concerned about. I do think that the offensive line is going to get better as the year goes on, and I expect them to run the football against South Florida. They'll win.
Yeah, there's no question there. I just think that it's one thing, you get wake up calls, I think, as a young team and a new team, and I think Alabama's, obviously they had the big Texas game, didn't go their way, so that they're going to right the ship and figure this thing out going forward.
Number 8 Washington is at Michigan State. This is a 5:00 kick. It's on Peacock. You got to see this on that app if you want to watch it. Washington is a 16.5 point favorite. This line has skyrocketed since all the news came out about Mel Tucker, the head coach's suspension. And boy, that is a troubling story. Michigan State's had so much off of the athletic field in recent years to worry about with all of their athletic programs for awful reasons. And you just wonder how much it's going to impact the program on the field. I would bet at least a little, Gino. I'm going to take Penix in Washington.
Yeah, there's no question it's going to affect the team, and you don't know who your coach is. You don't know who's going to be left with the staff. You don't know, the news. It's obviously troubling to say the least. But Penix, their quarterback, he knows Michigan State. He was an Indiana quarterback before Washington. I think he's in his 10th year. I think he's a vested veteran this year in college football. But I think he knows about East Lansing. But he's going to go on the road and show him. Show him a great Pac-12 quarterback. Big Ten quarterback.
That's right. Yeah.
Remember
11,
me?
Yeah. Remember Joe Milton when he used to be a quarterback at a different program? Now he's the quarterback at Tennessee. Number 11 Tennessee is at Florida in the Swamp at 7:00 on ESPN. At some point, Billy Napier is going to have a big win, isn't he? The Vols are 7-point favorites on the road in the Swamp. What do you like?
You would think at some point, but it's not going to be this week. I think Tennessee is. I think they're very well coached. I like the offense Heupel runs, and they seem to they've got the personnel on their side. And I don't know. It just seems like we talk about the confidence of Colorado and the confidence the team has in going into a game. Everything you hear out of Gainesville, it doesn't seem like they have the confidence, and especially in a game like Tennessee, to win this.
North Carolina, I agree with you, by the way. I think Tennessee will win the game, and I'm with you on that. I don't think Florida has the horses, especially at the skill positions. Number 20, North Carolina, 3:30 Eastern on ESPN, host Minnesota. Heels are 7.5 point favorites. I say the Heels stay undefeated in the Katie Zarzour era and get to 3-0. How about you?
I would agree with you. I think it's going to be a good game. I obviously Minnesota always plays everybody. It seems tougher than normal. But I think Max got a chip on his shoulder with the NC2A and that awful ruling against his wide receiver, and obviously you got one of the most talented quarterbacks in college football right now in May. So I would take UNC.
I just did a game with Georgia and Ball State last week, and one of Ball State's quarterbacks is on their 4th different team, transferring immediately to each one. Makes no sense. Real quick, we got to get these last two in. This is, I think, the game of the weekend. Pitt is a 1-point favorite at West Virginia in this great rivalry game. 7:30 on ABC. I'm taking Pitt on the road to beat the Mountaineers.
Oh, wow. Another change. I'm going West Virginia. C.J. Donaldson, Trey Lathan, Gulliver prep kids from down here in Miami. I know them well, and they're talented, and they will lead the Mountaineers to victory.
And then finally, we've got BYU at 7:30 on ESPN2 at Arkansas. The Razorbacks are 8.5-point favorites, Gino.
Oh, wow. I would definitely take the points if you were giving me the points, but I'll take the home team, the Razorbacks.
I disagree. I'm going with BYU
Wow.
to win in Fayetteville. So we have 3 differences this week: Mississippi State, LSU, West Virginia, Pitt, and Arkansas, BYU. Can't wait to watch these games. Listen to you call Ole Miss, Georgia Tech. Watch us call K-State and Mizzou. For Gino Torretta, I'm Taylor Zarzour. Thank you for listening once again this week to Touchdown Radio Tailgate. Week 4 looks great. Can't wait to talk about that next week here on Channel 84.